samadhi here in the void. Bir Tawil, the blank page. When time breaks, something in space stops working. Because time and space are not separate things. They are two sides of the same coin. They are the two ways in which the universal mind unfolds into matter. Time is movement, space is form. And when one goes out of alignment, the other fragments. In the previous days, I spoke about how to repair the clock, about how to synchronize internal cycles with external cycles, about how to calibrate consciousness with lunations, solstices, equinoxes, and eclipses. But for time to be repaired, one must first find the place in space where it broke. One must find the void, the hollow, the fissure. And that search led me to a very specific place on the map. A place that technically does not exist. A place that no country claims. A place that is quite literally a blank page. That place is called Bir Tawil, the original error when the photon left the center. To understand Bir Tawil, one must first understand what broke. At the origin, everything was contained in a single point. A point of infinite density where all information, all energy, all possibility were unified. That point is what some traditions call God, what physics calls the singularity, what consciousness calls the origin. And in that point, all light was at the center. The primordial photon was held in the core of the original atom. Everything was in perfect balance. But something happened. The photon left the center. It projected outward, and that movement broke the unity. It generated an explosion. It created the Big Bang. It fragmented the original idea. It dispersed consciousness into infinite angles. It gave rise to discord. That is the original error. It is not a moral error. It is not a sin. It is not a fall from paradise. It is a geometric error, a photon that moved from its original position, a particle that shifted, an image that refracted incorrectly, and that infinitesimal displacement changed the axis of everything. The poison and the medicine, the enantiomers of light. In chemistry, there is a concept called enantiomers. They are molecules identical in composition but inverted in structure. Like hands, the right hand and the left hand have the same components, but they are mirror images of each other. And here is what is fascinating. In some cases, one enantiomer can be medicine, and the other can be poison. The same molecule, with the same atoms but inverted, can heal or can kill. This is how light works. This is how consciousness works. When light refracts correctly, it generates medicine. It generates coherence. It generates creation. When light refracts incorrectly, it generates poison. It generates confusion. It generates fragmentation. And the original error was an incorrect refraction, an angle that deviated, a photon that left the center and cast a shadow where there had once been light. That shadow is the poison. That distortion is the fissure in space. But here is the key. If poison and medicine are enantiomers, then the very same point where the poison is can be transformed into medicine. One only needs to correct the angle. One only needs to refract the light correctly again. Lucas, the point where everything refracted incorrectly. Lucas means last universal common ancestry source. It is the concept biology uses to refer to the first cell, the first organism, the first pattern of life from which all living beings on the planet descend. But Lucas is not only biological, it is cosmological. Lucas is the first point where light refracted incorrectly. It is the first nucleus where the photon shifted from the center. It is the first fractal where the original error was inscribed into matter. And from that point, the error expanded. It multiplied. It projected itself into thousands of options, thousands of stories, thousands of possible realities. Because in the universe, everything is a holographic projection of a proton. Each particle contains the information of the whole. And if the original pattern is distorted, the entire projection will be distorted. That is why correcting Lucas is correcting the origin. It is returning to the point where the photon left the center and realigning it. CERN and the search for the God particle. In 2012, at CERN in Geneva, humanity announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. They called it the God particle. The Higgs boson is the particle that gives mass to all other particles. It activates the Higgs field, the field that allows energy to become matter. It is what converts waves into particles. It is what makes physics as we know it possible. But to find that particle, they had to break unity. They had to accelerate protons to near the speed of light and smash them together. They had to fragment what was contained in a unified field. And according to Gahn, that act generated new errors in the pattern. Because every time you break unity while searching for the origin, you create more fragmentation. Every time you try to see the particle of God from the outside, you move it farther from the center. Science in searching for truth broke the truth. Science in denying God generated all gods. Science in trying to see unity fragmented unity. And that paradox is exactly the same as the original error. It is the photon leaving the center. It is light projecting outward. It is consciousness searching for the origin at the periphery. The broken hologram when a void expands. In a hologram, each part contains the information of the whole. If you break a hologram into 1,000 pieces, each piece still contains the complete image. It does not fragment into separate parts. It multiplies into thousands of versions of the whole. This is how the universe works. Everything is a holographic projection of the universal mind. Each atom contains the information of the cosmos. Each cell contains the pattern of the origin. But when something breaks at the origin, when a photon shifts, when a proton loses its center, that error is projected into all the copies. And what is projected is not a fragment. It is a void, a blank space, a hollow, an absence. And that void expands into thousands of options in history. It multiplies into infinite possibilities. It branches into all possible futures. Because where there was once a single light, there are now 1,000 reflections. Where there was once a single truth, there are now 1,000 mirages. Where there was coherence, there is now confusion. That void is the poison. That absence is the fissure in space. But it is also the medicine, because it is the only place where something new can be created. Bir Tawil, the void on the map. Bir Tawil is a triangle of arid land covering 2,060 square kilometers located between Egypt and Sudan. And it is a geopolitical rarity. Neither country officially claims it. This is unusual. Normally, countries fight over territory. There are wars, disputes, and diplomatic conflicts over every square meter of land that has strategic value, natural resources, or geopolitical importance. But Bir Tawil is the opposite. Both countries reject it. Both prefer not to have it. Why? Because claiming Bir Tawil would require renouncing the Halab Triangle, a much larger and resource-rich territory right next to it. And neither country is willing to make that sacrifice. So Bir Tawil remains outside all official claims. And it is considered in legal terms a case of terra nullius, land belonging to no one. Terra nullius, the blank page. Terra nullius is a Latin term meaning land of no one, territory that belongs to no state, space that the political system does not integrate, does not name, and does not administer. For centuries, colonial powers used the concept of terra nullius to justify the invasion and conquest of territories inhabited by indigenous peoples. They claimed those lands had no owner because they did not recognize the social organization of those peoples. But Bir Tawil is different. It is genuinely a void in the system, a hole in the map, a place that literally no one wants. And on the symbolic plane, that hole in the map becomes the perfect metaphor for what is being sought. A place that functions as a blank page for collective consciousness. A space with no flag, with no history of conquest, with no dominant narrative, with no pre-existing structure conditioning what can be created. A fertile void, a creative silence, an absence that can be filled with something completely new. The void as medicine. Here is the turn. The void can be poison or it can be medicine. When the void is confusion, when it is absence without purpose, when it is fragmentation without meaning, it is poison. But when the void is potential, when it is open space, when it is a blank page ready to be written, it is medicine. Bir Tawil is that void. It is the place in space where something broke and remained blank. It is the geographical reflection of the original error. It is the fissure in the map that corresponds to the fissure in time. But precisely because of that, it is the perfect place to plant the seed of something new. Because where there is no prior structure, a new structure can be created. Where there is no dominant narrative, a different narrative can be written. Where there is no nation-state, a state of consciousness can manifest. From Bir Tawil to inspiration. Bir Tawil is not the project. Bir Tawil is the inspiration. It is the symbol, it is the metaphor. It is the recognition that there are still blank spaces in the world, and that those blank spaces can become laboratories of consciousness. Because what is sought is not to conquer territory. What is sought is to create a state of consciousness that can manifest in space. And for that to happen, a point of origin is needed. A place where the page is blank. A space where light can refract correctly. Bir Tawil is that point. Not as possession, not as conquest, but as inspiration to imagine that it is possible to create something different. A new state, a new form of organization, a new way of being in the world. An ontocracy, the power of being. A structure based on the biology of consciousness, not on the hierarchy of control. The nation born from the void. All nations were born from some form of void. A group of people organized themselves. They delimited a territory. They wrote laws, they raised a flag. And they said, this is ours. But those nations were born from a state of consciousness rooted in fragmentation. From the idea of us versus them. From the need to defend, to control, to separate. What would happen if a nation were born from a different state of consciousness? What if it were born from integration? From the idea that the other is a mirror, not a threat. From a multiplicity of probabilities, not from rigid singularity. That is the question Bir Tawil inspires. And the answer to that question is what will be explored in the next steps. Because the void in space can become the medicine that repairs time. And the blank page can become the map of a new state of consciousness. Welcome to the fertile void.